Okay, looking at music after 1945 and looking at representative pieces. This is chapter 21 on page 454. The chapter says 8 representative pieces, and in your textbook there are 8. However, not all of these examples are easily found on YouTube, so I've made some edits. Okay, so the very first piece that y'all are going to look at is Sonatas and Interludes for Prepared Piano, written in the 40s by John Cage. So John Cage, he lived from 1912 to 1992, and he was the creator of chance music, and he's certainly an experimental composer. He also developed a lot of percussion music, so making percussion ensembles and elevating the percussion group family of instruments to a higher level and giving them more interesting repertoire. But one of the inventions that he came up with, along with a lot of other fun ideas, is the prepared piano. It is when you have a piano, a regular grand piano, whose sound is altered by objects like bolts, screws, rubber bands, anything that you can wedge between the strings of the keys. And so this starts around 1940, which is why he uses it for his prepared piano sonatas and interludes. This is some of his best performed or most performed works. It's 20 brief pieces, and the unpredictability created by the prepared piano reflects Eastern philosophy, and he was into reading a lot of Eastern philosophy. So you have this example in the playlist, and you have some information, a little bit more information in your textbook on page 454 and 455. As you can see from just this thumbnail, there are lots of what looks like screws and bolts in the piano here. Just fair warning, if you do this to a piano, you will, I would say 99% chance, knock the piano out of tune because these strings are held under tension, and to put something between the strings is obviously going to mess with that. So unless you are prepared to have the piano retuned after you finish playing around with the instrument, don't do this. You could also break the strings, which is even more expensive. Okay, so the next is the Poème électronique, or the electronic poem written in 1958 by Edgar Varese. He lived from 1883, died in 1965, and he was born in France, but he lived most of his life in America. In the 1920s and 30s, he would explore a lot of percussive sounds, so hopefully you're seeing a trend here. 20th century composers, particularly the second half of the 20th century, really like percussive instruments. But Varese wrote the first important work for percussion ensemble. So between he and John Cage, percussion instruments start to really become more respected, I guess we could say. The electronic poem is one of the earliest masterpieces for electronic music, and it was created in a tape studio. So back when people had, even before cassette tapes, so that's well before y'all. This was premiered, I guess we could say premiered, at the pavilion of the Philips Radio Corporation at the 1958 Brussels World's Fair. So this was on exhibit for tons and tons of people. So it was what this pavilion was. It was this building, and it had 425 loudspeakers spaced out amongst the pavilion, and it created different special effects as you're walking around. And then he also had pictures projected up onto the walls so that as you're walking, the pictures may change, but you will see images in conjunction with music or these sounds. And so that is a mixed media example, one of the first mixed media examples. And this is what the pavilion looked like, very modern. So you can get the idea that this is supposed to be an experience, not so much a performance. And you have this example in your playlist. You also have a listening outline on page 457 in your textbook. If you don't make it through all of this song just listening to it, that's okay. Neither have I. Okay, so going to the next selection, this is Ancient Voices of Children, written in 1970 by George Crumb. George Crumb is an American composer, and he chose poetry by Federico Garcia Lorca, who is a Spanish writer. And in this, he's focused a lot on percussion, but also on tone colors. So he'll often isolate a particular instrument or a particular voice so that you, the audience member, can really hone in on the different tone colors created by these instruments. It starts with a mezzo-soprano's vocalise as she is singing into an amplified body of a piano. It's kind of confusing, but when you see the video, you'll understand. Prominent instruments are the vibraphone, it's kind of like a xylophone, but instead of wooden bars, it's metal bars. And you also hear a marimba, which is like a xylophone, but it has resonators, so it sounds a little bit different. There isn't a really good YouTube clip of just the From Where Do You Come, My Love, My Child, which is the listening guide on 459, but I do have the kind of like the entirety of Ancient Voices of Children that you can listen to and just kind of click through and just see and hear what is being performed in this work. Okay, next page 460, looking at the Libertango by Astor Piazzolla. This was written in 1974, and it's based off of a tango. So it's an Argentinian dance for couples, very popular in Buenos Aires. Very likely you have heard and probably have seen a tango. So the tango craze in Europe and America started in the early 1900s. I'm not sure why those are not capitalized. They should be. But Astor Piazzolla lived from 1921, died in 1992. He's an Argentinian-American composer, and he created a unique tango style, particularly in this work, meant for concert. So it's meant to be performed rather than danced to, although you still can dance to it. But it fuses a lot of classical and jazz elements into the tango, so it's a blend of different elements. He studied with both Alberto Ginastera and Nadia Boulanger, so he has quite an eclectic perception when it comes to composing. And Libertango is basically the song to liberty. And you have this in your playlist and a listening guide on 461. So looking to the next page on 462, looking at Philip Glass, who is, again, an American composer, but a minimalist composer. He was influenced by classical, we use that term a little bit loosely now, and rock musicians, and because he is a minimalist composer, he is emphasizing a steady pulse, clear tonality, and repetitive patterns. He did study with Nadia Boulanger. Again, she keeps popping up at this point in history. He also studied Indian drumming, and also sitar with Ravi Shankar, who is an Indian composer working within more of the traditional style. He was influenced by the steady stream of rhythmic pulses, quote by Glass himself, in the traditional Indian music, and this even kind of spurred him on to study Buddhist meditation, which the Buddhist meditation helped him to kind of reinvent his compositional style, leading to full-blown minimalism. So we are going to look at Knee Play 1 from Einstein on the Beach, written in 1976. This is an opera. A minimalist opera does sound oxymoronic, but it's not. This is his first opera, and this portion, the Knee Play 1, is an iconic moment. It's the opening of the opera, and you will hear people speaking and singing numbers. Okay, it doesn't really tell a story, but it does lend itself to the minimalist style. So you have a listening outline for Knee Play 1 on 464. Next is another composer who works within minimalism or post-minimalism, John Adams. We're going to look at his work Short Ride in a Fast Machine, written in 1986. John Adams is also American, and some of his famous works are the operas Nixon in China, The Death of Klinghoffer, and Dr. Atomic. He also wrote a piece called On the Transmigration of Souls, which was dedicated to the people who died in the Pentagon and the World Trade Center in the 9/11 attacks. This piece, The Short Ride in a Fast Machine, is just 4 minutes long, and it's a fanfare and a really popular orchestral piece. So if you don't like Knee Play 1, if you think it's just a little bit too wacky, too weird, you will probably be at least more comfortable, or at least find some common ground with Short Ride in a Fast Machine. Both Me Play 1 and Short Ride are going to be in the playlist. You have a listening guide for Short Ride in a Fast Machine on 465, and turning the page to 466, looking at Eric Whitacre. He is an American composer as well, but he's a 21st century composer, born in 1970. Two quotes from him that really exemplify his technique, his compositional technique. He says, "In my entire life, I had seen in black and white, and suddenly everything was in shocking technicolor." And I love this quote because it's him explaining the first time that he heard choir music. He's mostly a choral composer, and how it was just this amazing experience, and it was like a light bulb. He knew exactly what he wanted to do in life. Another quote from him: "The first and greatest responsibility is to the poem. I work very hard to understand the meaning of each poem I am setting, and when it comes time to compose the music, I simply try to quiet myself enough to hear the notes already hidden below the poet's words." So this is his approach to text setting, or taking the text and putting it to music, putting words to music. So he really tries to understand the true meaning. What we are going to look at is the Lux Aurum, which is Light and Gold, written in 2000, and it is an a cappella choral work. The original text for this was in English, but he had it translated into Latin, and you can guess why. So this is in your playlist. Really interesting thing about this, he basically developed the virtual choir. I know that in 2020 we have a lot of virtual choirs going on, but he's kind of a pioneer in this field. And so this is his very first virtual choir. He's had several since, including this year in 2020. But yeah, different people. He recorded himself conducting this work. He has like a click track available for everybody recording, and people watch his video as he is conducting and sing their own part, submit their videos, and then they were compiled into this production. You have a listening guide for Lux Aurum on 467. Okay, we are going to skip L'amour de loin and the Cityscape, simply because I can't find really good YouTube videos for those. If you do find those, awesome, let me know. But skipping ahead to page 475, we're going to look at the work Enora by Tania Leon, and she is a Cuban composer, now working in America. She is the conductor and composer at the City University of New York. Enora was written in 2009, and it was composed for Dance Brazil. And of course, it's incorporating a lot of Brazilian dance and music, but it also incorporates the libretto from the Nigerian prize laureate writer Wole Soyinka. And so there's a mixture of different influences in this work. This was written for mixed chorus, strings, and percussion. So it's using Yoruba Brazilian Portuguese. Yoruba is a language in Nigeria, and it also uses prayers from the Afro-Brazilian Yoruba tradition. So definitely trying to immerse itself into a specific region of Brazilian culture. What we are looking at is section 2, called The Sharing, and you have some information about this work on page 475 and a listening guide on 476. And this work is in your playlist. And that's it for this chapter.